think you're acting like a child.
And I think you're acting like an asshole.
There are so many popular and incorrect opinions in the Sex and the City fandom about the many men the girls dated throughout the series. The most popular being that Steve is a victim who deserved better than Miranda. Whole time Steve was a plague sent to destroy all. But while the majority of us routinely fight to death over whether Steve was victim or bum, there is one incorrect popular Sex and the City opinion that I have never seen challenged. And it's that Petrovsky was a bad partner or at fault for the demise of his relationship with Carrie. But I am finally here to tell y'all,
that is not correct.
Sex and the City fans will argue to the death whether Carrie belonged with Big or Aiden, and occasionally mention Berger just to kick his back in for dumping our girl on a post-it note. But when it comes to the last man Carrie dated before tying herself to Big until his untimely death in the reboot, Alexander Petrovsky gets paid dust. Skipped right over or dismissed as a bad relationship or a man who do carry some. And there are a few reasons for that we'll get into in a minute. Hold your horses, because first, you need to know that Alexander Petrovsky is one of my favorite characters to ever appear on Sex and the City because, contrary to popular belief, he was the best romantic partner Carrie ever had in the entire show. Yes, you heard me. Listen the up. Not only was Alexander Petrovsky Carrie's best partner, Petrovsky's approach to love and life was healthier than any of the girls and everyone else they ever dated, because Petrovsky modeled choosing love, but not over oneself, which is a lesson everyone could stand to learn. Petrovsky was intentional, he was vulnerable, he was romantic, he was ready and willing to commit emotionally, as well as to share his home, his space, and his life. And he communicated openly and honestly about all of his non-negotiables, his feelings, and his plans for the future. He carved out space for Carrie in his life, and he was intentional about building a future with her. But he never did so at the expense of his boundaries, his art, who he knew himself to be, or what he wanted from his life. All of which he communicated to Carrie up front. Compare and contrast how Petrovsky practiced love to how someone like Smith Jarrett did. Smith Jarrett, whose name was actually Jerry, but he allowed a woman who didn't even want to know his name well into fucking him to rename him Smith Jarrett, which, to be fair, was better for his career in the long run. But I talked about this in more detail in my Samantha video, because while we loved Smith and Samantha's relationship, because Samantha is our girl and we wanted to see her loved by a young, fine man who accepted her, if Smith were my friend, I'd have been begging him to go ahead and free himself, because that man was loving Samantha at the expense of his self-respect, which can be evidenced in many ways. But the only proof that I need is him waiting at the bottom of that elevator for her to finish ex-boyfriend, who she just left him for at a party she accompanied him to because she's embarrassed to be with him. Whereas Petrovsky was similarly a deep-throated romantic like Smith Jarrett, who was all for committing to Carrie and doing life with her. But unlike Smith Jarrett, he did not do it to his detriment. Everything Carrie said she wanted or quietly desired from every man she's ever dated throughout the series, Petrovsky offered to her without a fight or hesitation. The only thing Petrovsky failed to do was prioritize and center Carrie during a week of a pivotal moment in his career, when she would have preferred he play out the Parisian fantasy she had in her head to make up for Big, the man she really loved, leaving her for Paris and getting engaged to a woman he met there. Yet, somehow, the series ends with Big, the man who never even took Carrie to Paris. Or anywhere, actually. During the entire show, Big never so much as took Carrie to Atlantic City. But the series ends with Big, the who was breadcrumbing Carrie the whole show, rescuing her from the man who had actually done everything Big refused to do. The way both Carrie and the audience perceive Petrovsky and their relationship is deeply rooted in xenophobia and desirability. Part of why the girls reject Petrovsky is that they don't find him desirable within the show's very specific idea of what a desirable man looks and behaves like. Charming, performative, and oriented around Carrie. Whereas Petrovsky is self-contained, older, direct, and not interested in winning their approval. And instead of reading that as confidence, they read it as arrogance and strangeness. And once he's outside of their desirability framework, everything he does gets interpreted negatively. Traits that would be seen as complex or mysterious or grown in a man they would want becomes red flags in a man they don't. That's what makes it so easy for them to reduce him to the Russian. Because at that point, they're no longer engaging with him as an individual. They're dismissing him as a type. And in turn, we see and treat him similarly. Which is the reason fans characterize the man that wrote Carrie poetry, sang sang her love songs, bought her designer dresses, gave her the key to his place, and moved her to Paris with him as aloof, cold, neglectful, or even abusive. Yeah, abusive. Days be dragging it. It's the reason fans were rooting for her to end up with a that actually was all of those things to carry throughout their relationship. Both before and after Petrovsky, mind you, because he's packaged as the home team they're supposed to be rooting for. Another way of thinking about this is if Sex and the City were a reality TV show, Petrovsky got a bad at it. So today is the day we truly analyze Carrie's relationship with Petrovsky and Petrovsky as a character, instead of accepting the way the show wanted us to see him and people like him in order to justify Carrie returning to the same toxic-ass relationship she had been in and out of the entire show. So, without further ado, this is why Alexander Petrovsky deserved better. Roll the theme song, Aaron.
Black independent, strongest in women. It's Olay, it's Olay, it's Olay, it's Olay now. I know that I'm worth it, so make sure to listen. It's Olay, it's Olay, it's Olay, it's Olay.
In the case of Alexander Petrovsky as a romantic partner to Carrie Bradshaw, he stands accused of being cold, arrogant, neglectful, and abusive. As counsel for Mr. Petrovsky, we not only deny those charges, we are also raising the affirmative defense of xenophobia and lookism. The evidence today is going to show that not only is Alexander Petrovsky innocent of all charges, he has also been the victim of intentional cultural misperception. So, let's begin walking through how and why everyone had Petrovsky so f***ed up. So Carrie meets Alexander Petrovsky at an art exhibit she accompanied Charlotte to. Petrovsky is a famous artist, but only Charlotte is privy to this fact because Carrie is uncultured. But it was in fact that unculturedness that attracted Petrovsky to her. He, for some reason, found her inability to appreciate the exhibit cute. Later on, when he gets Carrie's number and calls her to try to ask out, she hangs up on him several times because Carrie's uncultured ass he thought was so cute heard an accent on the other end of the line and immediately decided it would be impossible for her to decipher what he was saying. So she just kept saying wrong number and banging the phone on him without letting him get a sentence out. Whole time, Petrovsky speak perfect English. This is played for laughs, but between this and her choosing to refer to him as the Russian, it's the kind of shit that should make your ass itch. Imagine Petrovsky wasn't Russian. Imagine, say, he was Indian. Now picture this gal banging his phone on him and referring to him as the Indian to all her friends, and tell me how it lands for you. Calling Petrovsky the Russian isn't just shorthand. It's a way of, one, flattening him into a stereotype so they don't have to engage with him as a person, and two, othering him as a foreigner. From the moment Alexander Petrovsky appears, he's never Alexander Petrovsky. He's the Russian, which immediately signifies that he's this other thing, a foreigner who is alien to them, something over there. So everything he does and everything about him is filtered through a lens designed to distort him to match a stereotype about Russians. I mentioned this briefly in my Desperate Housewives was Conservative Propaganda video, but the character assassination of Russian people as cold, calculating, untrustworthy, and criminal is legit and deliberate anti-Russian propaganda, which has been prevalent in American media since the late 1800s. But the Red Scare is when it truly sunk its teeth into the American media landscape, which is why I have never in my life seen a Russian character introduced in an American show that was not given varying forms of the same prejudicial treatment. In fact, Petrovsky do good in comparison to some of the others. From the gal in Desperate Housewives, to Petrovsky, to Svetlana in Shameless. I could go on about this forever. These Russian stereotypes are so pervasive in American media that it requires us to stop and consider that context whenever we think of how these characters are crafted or how we perceive them. Moreover, xenophobia as a whole is so readily accepted in American media that it's played for laughs and considered harmless. So if you couple that general attitude with the fact that so many people already wrongly believe that if someone will date or procreate with someone of another cultural or racial background, that it means that they can't be prejudiced towards them. Most folk get a good little chuckle out of how Carrie and company perceived, discussed, and treated Petrovsky. And I'm here to tell y'all again,
That is not correct.
the first words out Big's mouth when she told him about Petrovsky was a Russian slur.
You're moving to France with a Ruski?
And it doesn't stop there. Lone slander every time he interact with any of her people. So now that we've got that understood, let's get back to Petrovsky calling Carrie to try to ask out. Petrovsky eventually manages to get her on the line long enough to let her know that the immigrant she keeps banging the phone on is the same immigrant she was just flirting with the other day. So Petrovsky recalls her comment at the exhibit that she didn't believe that the artist was really staying there at the museum all day and night without eating. So he invites her to go at nighttime to see if she's still there. This is the beginning of Carrie and Petrovsky's relationship. Once Carrie and Petrovsky begin dating, Carrie immediately felt the need to defend the relationship to Miranda, who wasn't feeling the idea of him for the same shallow-ass reasons the audience, whether consciously or subconsciously, didn't with him. Because he was too old to be desirable in her mind. And the truth about television and movies is that the audience determines which romantic interest they root for based on who they themselves are most attracted to. Miranda thought his age made him undesirable, and Carrie, Charlotte, and Samantha all pushed back. But I think it's worth noting each of their rationales for why they pushed back. Charlotte thought his success as an artist made him desirable. Samantha thought his reputation as a ladies' man made him desirable. And Carrie's desire for him was rooted in exotifying him as a foreigner, which was demonstrated by her insistence on calling him her lover in a goofy-ass accent that was nothing like his accent. We already know she thinks his accent is chicken scratch to her ass, so I don't know why she fooling around now. Carrie was creating a fantasy around her lover that Petrovsky's otherness was central to. And I need y'all to understand that fetishizing or exotifying a person is not the same as loving or valuing their personhood. Think about how the same white men voting for Trump want them a spicy Latino. Anyway, the point is, Carrie and Petrovsky's relationship was doomed from day one because they painted him as an old-ass, undesirable foreigner that Carrie had to justify wanting to be with because being with him was so incomprehensible to the people around her. And to make matters worse, this Carrie sabotage a relationship Bradshaw we talking about. Actually, saying Carrie has sabotaged her relationships is an understatement. Carrie is a gal who quite literally trains men. Trains them to mistreat and breadcrumb her, just so she could complain about it later. And her relationship with Petrovsky is one of the greatest examples of that, because Petrovsky comes bearing all the romance Carrie ever wanted. But she insisted she don't need that as an American girl, only to spin round and want all those bells and whistles she told him to quit doing once they're in Paris. Let's talk about it. From the moment their relationship begins, Petrovsky's locked in. He's doing all kind of romantic shit for Carrie, like buying her designer dresses of her dreams to go to the opera, dancing in the middle of the street with her, performing music for her, reading her poems. And Carrie did what she always does whenever a man attempts to offer her the romance or commitment she so desperately wanted from Big. She insisted he stop because it makes her uncomfortable, feels insincere, cringy, or too much, or just plain gives her the ick. Which is precisely what she did to Aiden throughout their relationship. Because I've said it before and I will say it again. Carrie Bradshaw did not think highly of herself. So she didn't trust men who genuinely cared about her or wanted to be with her without limitations because she did not believe she was worthy of those things. And she questioned the judgment of men who thought she did. Ain't no way to turn Carrie off quicker than to treat her like she mattered. Carrie looked down on for like,
Cause I don't care.
Yeah, immediately no. Immediately no. Immediately.
Something y'all need to understand about Carrie and Sex and the City is that after Carrie and Big break up and he marries Natasha, from that moment on, the primary focus Carrie has in every relationship going forward is simply to see if she could get those men to do all the things Big wouldn't, and whether she'd love them if they did. There is no test or request from Carrie to any of her subsequent boyfriends that was not about Big. They didn't know it, but Carrie had all them running competition with Big in her head. I am going to call this the Big test. So because Big wouldn't let Carrie keep a toothbrush at his place and buried the one photo he had of him in his drawer where none of his other hoes could see it, Carrie could not wait to see how much real estate or access to his home Petrovsky would give her. And Petrovsky passed the test with flying colors because he came right out and gave our girl a key. But Carrie is a gal who doesn't really like men in relationships so much as she likes the idea and the uncertainty of them. Carrie thinks that there are kinds of men she should like, so she dates them knowing she doesn't, but telling herself that maybe she'll like them if they do X, Y, and Z, i.e. the things Big wouldn't do. So she tests them. And if they pass the test, she immediately gives them another test in hopes that they fail that one, so she has an excuse to not feel for them what she already wasn't feeling. And for as much as Carrie romanticizes her relationships and becomes discontent when men don't live up to the fantasy in her head, if they try to give her the romance she fantasizes about, she rejects that too. Carrie's relationship with Big starts with Carrie being sick that she Big on what was supposed to be their first date, and then all he does for her after that is take her to the back of a random Chinese restaurant men only take women they don't want to be seen with.
Oh
But when Carrie and Petrovsky start dating, he breaks out all the stops. He breaks out all the stops she complained Big and all the other men never did. After she happened to mention to him how much he loved the designer he knew personally, Petrovsky surprised Carrie with a dress by that designer and planned to take her to the opera. When he starts to dance with this gal in the middle of the street on the way there, Carrie decides she is going to pretend to pass out in order to convey to him that it's too much and that instead she would prefer he just took her to McDonald's to get a Big Mac. Y'all understand that Carrie quite literally requested and trained Petrovsky to give her the bare minimum because that's what she's used to and comfortable with and thinks she deserves from men. That's all it is, because when in y'all life y'all ever seen Carrie eating at no McDonald's? Carrie doesn't know how to accept men treating her well because she does not perceive herself as worthy of the kind of treatment that she is so envious of when women like Natasha receive it. Which is the reason why Big, the man who treated her like she wasn't shit in every way, is who she chose to run behind for the rest of her life. Carrie liked uncertainty and she felt unworthy of stability. And with Big, she can keep feeling like that. Which is why she got the ick when Petrovsky read her love poems, only to one day readily accept Big copying and pasting the poems he wouldn't read into her email as the most bare minimum attempt of getting her back after standing her up on their wedding day. Carrie is one of those people who feels unnerved when ain't nothing going wrong. Those kind of people don't find stability comforting the way the average person does. They prefer the drama, the will they, won't they, which I'm pretty sure Carrie literally told us before that all she into is the will they, won't they. You remember how Carrie was doing nimble gymnastics to appeal to Aiden after their first date when he refused to kiss or date her for being a dirty smoker? Y'all remember how pressed Carrie was for Aiden when she saw him at Steve's bar opening party and he wasn't checking for her? That gal hadn't thought about him in months. Or when he was treating her bad and flirting with his bartender to get his lick back because she kept talking to Big. Carrie was never more interested in Aiden than she was when she was worried he was losing interest in her or might leave her or didn't think she was good enough for him. Then and only then. That's why never being Big's number one choice guaranteed that Big would always be hers. Carrie loved to chase. She is do it for the love of the game.
A nigga like me, man, I love the game. I love the hustle, man. I be feeling like one of them ball-playing niggas, you know? Like Bird or Magic or something. Yeah, you know, a nigga got dough. A nigga could leave the league. But if I leave, the fans still gonna love me, man?
And y'all can't convince me that Big didn't know that that's just how Carrie go. Big ass knew just what to do to keep her on the hook, even in the afterlife. Which is why y'all can't convince me that Big didn't leave that money for Natasha in his will just to give Carrie one last mystery. He know her ass needs something to obsess about. Carrie and all, we're gonna solve a mystery. Big told us Carrie wasn't the marrying type from time, and he ain't tell no kind of lie. Y'all remember how soon after Big and Carrie got married, she was in Dubai kissing Aiden just because Big, her 50-something, almost 60-year-old husband, wanted to be in the house too much for her. Carrie did not want a man to just love and choose her and settle into that. Because Carrie did not believe no man worth having would want that with her and only her. That's the tea. Carrie did not just so happen to always be worried a man didn't really like her, was getting bored of her, or didn't do a thing because he didn't really love her, or whatever contrived thing she came up with. She needed to be preoccupied with those things. Otherwise, she didn't know what to do with herself. Y'all remember how stressed out she was at the beginning of her relationship with Aiden when there wasn't no problems or anything for her to prove to him in order to gain his affection? Stability had her silly ass running around talking about she wasn't feeling the zazazoo. Oh, stupid girl.
I want problems, always!
That clip is Carrie in a nutshell. But I do understand why Carrie was like that. As someone with anxiety, the thing about anxiety that's a bitch is sometimes when nothing's wrong, you still feel anxious. But because there isn't actually something wrong that you could pinpoint and attribute to why you're feeling anxious, it creates this kind of panic. And when you've experienced that kind of panic, you can come to prefer having external problems that you could blame for why you're feeling like that. Like an ancient ass. Carrie was an anxious, avoidant, insecure person with low self-esteem. She would have felt anxious if no men were in her life. She would have felt anxious if she was in the perfect relationship. But if she's in a relationship with a man who actually gives her legitimate reasons to feel anxious and insecure, she can point to exactly what he's doing to blame for her internal problem. And not only does that feel a million times better than the panic of not knowing why you feel anxious when technically nothing's wrong, it also gives you something external that you can preoccupy yourself with trying to fix so you can continue continue avoiding the actual internal issues at play because those are much harder to fix. In other words, Carrie preferred unstable relationships because it was the only thing she knew, and her dumbass insisted on being an anti-therapy bitch, so she never healed or addressed the trauma that she acted out in all of her relationships. Which is why Carrie would much rather cry over Big or bicker with Berger than be wined and dined by Petrovsky or wedded to Aiden. Carrie does shit for the plot. So back to the big test. So when Petrovsky gives her a key and free reign of his entire apartment, Carrie moves on to test number 2, meet my friends. Because if you recall, Carrie wanted Big to meet her friends because they didn't rate her relationship with Big. So she wanted them to meet him to try and prove to them, see, he does really care about me. But Big wasn't into that. So of course, Carrie got to give Petrovsky the Big test. But unlike Big, Petrovsky quickly agrees. However, when the night comes, Petrovsky is in a bad place because he's working on the art installation that'll be the first art he's revealed to the public in an extremely long time. So he's going through self-doubt, anxiety, preemptive depression, and everything else that creatives go through. He does not provide this detailed explanation to Carrie, but he does tell her that he can't meet her friends at night because he needs to be hemmed up in his studio working on his art. This is both disappointing and triggering to Carrie, who was having deja vu of the time Big pulled out on meeting her friends simply because he didn't want to go and didn't give a fuck about her friends because he barely gave a damn about her. While these situations are not the same because Petrovsky's reason was legitimate, it still hits Carrie's nervous system the same, and it leaves her in the position of having to explain his absence to her friends that she assumes will think she's in yet another relationship where she's far more invested than the man. So when the girls expressed their disappointment they couldn't meet him that night, Carrie takes it upon herself to say, you know what? What he told me. I'm taking these bitches back to his place. So this gal decides that she can use the key she just get, and she can make this stop what he's doing to come meet her friends, because the most important thing to Carrie is not the relationship itself, but proving to her friends that a man is serious about her and she's not getting played again. So she ambushes him, then gets upset with him for politely telling her friends he's glad to meet them and they are welcome to stay and make themselves comfortable in his apartment, but he has to keep working in his studio, which he returns to. The girls leave because it's awkward that Carrie just unsuccessfully ambushed her boyfriend to force him to meet them. So an embarrassed Carrie goes into Petrovsky's studio, where she's not even supposed to be, to confront him about being rude to her friends. Whole time, it's Carrie who blatantly violating the man's boundaries, you know. Imagine you tell somebody you just started dating that you can't meet their friends on a particular night because you need to work, and they come and bring them people to your house without your consent to try to force it on you.
What the fuck?
Talk. Carrie was a brazen gal. Because how you try something like that and ain't expect to get cussed right out? At minimum, she should have expected a response like the one Big gave her when he caught her stalking him at church trying to force him into telling his mom about her. And that response is a good, what the fuck are you doing? But Petrovsky didn't cuss her out or question where she was raised or even acknowledge her behavior as inappropriate, because Petrovsky wasn't even thinking about her friends or her antics because he was too busy being scared to death that his comeback to the art world was going to be a flop, which he openly and honestly shares with her. And it's important that we note that Petrovsky does eventually host a dinner to meet all of Carrie's friends, at which point their ungrateful, xenophobic asses judge and talk about him for no reason beyond them projecting their own insecurities and stereotypes onto him. Whole time the man was just trying to mind his business and let them have dinner in his house. But before we move on from this, I want to take a second to highlight this important point, because it's going to be very important when we get to Petrovsky and Carrie's time in Paris together, and it's fundamental to understanding Petrovsky and ambitious people who have a passion or a purpose as a whole. Let me make sure y'all understand this, because Carrie didn't understand. Alexander Petrovsky was a world-renowned artist who had not released any work in many, many years. And he was in the middle of preparing for his long-awaited comeback, doing an entirely new style of art. And he was not only locked the in, he was terrified that it wouldn't be received well and that he would destroy his legacy and reputation. So it was very important to him and his sense of self that it be a success. In other words, at the time in Petrovsky's life and his relationship with Carrie, he was in the middle of a major life event and it was his number one priority. And that was okay. He didn't mistreat Carrie and he didn't disregard her, but he prioritized what he needed to do for himself and his career based on his goals and his own feelings. He felt anxious and unsure about his work, so he put more time in and he sat with his feelings instead of performing for Carrie's friends that particular night. And there was nothing wrong with that. There is something implicit in our society and our media telling us that there is something wrong with a person's romantic partner or relationship not being their number one priority every second of the day or during every moment of their lives. or not being the most important thing to them. We are made to believe that if we have dreams, those dreams should never, for even a moment, eclipse our relationships, our partners, or even our desire for those things. We are fed this idea that real love is about forsaking any and everything else, that we should aspire to have someone that puts all of our needs before their own. And if we're not willing to always put love first, we're not worthy of real love and commitment. But I'm here to tell y'all that that's some bullshit. It is okay to have a purpose that feels bigger than your relationship because it feels bigger than you. It's okay for your passion or your purpose to ride shotgun sometimes. You can love someone to the moon and back. It does not mean that they will or should always be the center of your world, at the forefront of every event in your life or every decision you make. Your love for them does not need to be bigger or more important than your dreams and what you want for yourself. Their feelings do not always have to matter more than your own. Petrovsky did not have to prioritize Carrie's anxiety over his own. And it shouldn't have been a problem because you can trust that Carrie always can prioritize her own anxiety enough for the both of them. Thus why she ambushed the man. But Carrie does abort mission confrontation when she realizes that Petrovsky is depressed about his art once he confides in her. It would have served Petrovsky to have clocked Carrie's teenage girl behavior that night, but it's not until he tries to get Carrie to take Samantha's cancer diagnosis seriously, and she acts like he's trying to kill Samantha himself, that he realizes that Carrie is a child.
I think you're acting like a child.
And I think you're acting like an asshole.
American media has spent decades teaching audiences that Russians are cold, manipulative, opportunistic, and even dangerous and criminal. So when Petrovsky appears in this show, they're already suspicious of him, and they assume him to be cold. So when he doesn't immediately perform warmth in the way that they do, he's vilified. The episode where Carrie tells Petrovsky that Samantha has breast cancer is an important moment in both their relationship and the audience's perception of Petrovsky, because it's often cited as an example of Petrovsky's coldness, when in reality, it's an example of how he shows warmth and care. It's also an example of Carrie's immaturity and how everything that Petrovsky does gets filtered through this lens of other. And I'll explain what I mean by that. But before I do that, this part ain't really about Petrovsky, but I have always wanted to kick Carrie's back in about this, and I may never get the chance again, so la vie bohème. When Samantha tells Carrie she has breast cancer, Carrie receives that information just fine. The most emotion we get out of Carrie is her lashing on Petrovsky every time he even tried to broach the subject. But when Big was getting heart surgery, not even cancer, surgery, a heart surgery he didn't even care enough about her to tell her about, Carrie was busting out bawling each and every time it get mentioned. She couldn't even tell the girls about it without crying. And I, as a bitch who was not Samantha's friend, but was blubbering when she told Carrie she had cancer in the car, did not like that. I did not like that. And I mentally logged that in my proof that Carrie loved man more than her friends file. So anyway, that's all I had to say about that. Back to the actual reason I brought this up. When Carrie tells Petrovsky about Samantha having breast cancer, he tries to tell her about his friend who died from cancer. And no sooner have the words left his mouth than Carrie's turned the fuck up because she would prefer to pretend that cancer is small things, Samantha ain't in no real danger, and him trying to prepare her for any other outcome is some cold-blooded shit. Whole time, Petrovsky cared deeply about his friend, and losing her was especially painful because he hadn't prepared himself for the possibility that she could die. So when he learns that Carrie's best friend is sick and that she's not dealing with just how sick she really is, he worries that she's going to be that much more devastated should she pass. So he tries to protect her by sharing his experience with her. And I am of a few minds about Carrie's reaction. First, if I looked at this in the light most favorable to Carrie, I can understand not being mentally prepared to even entertain the thought of losing your best friend. And I can understand exactly why it would be triggering if someone keeps trying to talk about death when you have chosen to practice avoidance whilst you hope for the best. That makes sense. And I'll also give Carrie this. Even if she is being irrational or reacting disproportionately, if she says that she is not in the mood for this conversation and to stop pushing it, Petrovsky continuing to try to force the conversation is a violation of a boundary she set, and he's in the wrong for that. And while her reaction was immature, I can understand getting a little besides myself if I keep trying to fend off my worst nightmare and my mind trying to force it to the forefront. But had she had the maturity to let him so much as finish the thought it took her a full episode to allow him to get out instead of overreacting, she would have known he was operating from care. Which brings me to my second point. A part of the reason why Carrie immediately assumed Petrovsky was operating in bad faith by bringing up his friend's death just to be cruel or cold is not because that's who he is as a person or has ever demonstrated himself to be. It's because that's how she perceives him as a Russian, which is why she immediately chalks up this disagreement to being a cultural one.
We had our first fight.
Yeah, I picked up on that.
I mean, this is a man who is so sensitive about so much, but then this death, deal with it. I know he's Russian, but Jesus, come on.
But not only was Petrovsky not being cold, cruel, inconsiderate, or cavalier about death, it wasn't a cultural difference. Lots of people, lots of Americans would take the same or a similar position as Petrovsky, that cancer is serious, people can and do die from cancer, and pretending like it's an impossibility might leave you emotionally worse off should the worst happen. Additionally, it's worth mentioning that the same Carrie who was so quick to paint him as someone who was cold and callous about death in the life of her friend because he was a Russian is the same Carrie and her friends who have literally attended the funerals of people they knew talking big shit throughout the series. Matter of fact, Carrie and Petrovsky was there, so he seen it. Carrie watched a bitch she knew plummet out of the window of a high rise, and she not only didn't give a she was talking shit about the bitch at her funeral. And she blamed the gal death on being single. The gal fall out the window trying to smoke a cigarette. Somehow, being single was to blame. But all of this is just one example of how the misperception of Petrovsky came to be. So let's talk about Miranda's role in all of this. Because Miranda not only demonstrated a shameless amount of prejudice towards Petrovsky, she chose to project her frustration with Carrie onto him because it was easier to blame him than to accept the fact that her best friend is the type of woman who will always choose a man over self and won't heed your warnings. Miranda hated Petrovsky so much he put aside her hatred for Big. Because when someone is framed as other to you, as a foreigner, as the Russian, to associate a slew of negative character traits with, it gives you permission to be suspicious of them and not to trust them. Which is why Miranda didn't think she had to justify disliking him. Every other man on the series had to do all kind of ballum to get the kind of hate that Miranda was throwing at Petrovsky based on nothing but hunches, vibes, and I just had a feeling.
Just say it. You don't like him.
Fine, I don't like him.
Then don't you go to Paris with him.
You're not that bitch or nothing, but you still ate that little one thing, you ate that one thing.
All of a sudden, Miranda just can't stomach him because he's arrogant. Was Big a humble man? Was Carrie's ever humble? Or was it because it was the immigrant? If you want to, you could try to chalk Miranda turning into a Mr. Big fan overnight into her just trusting the devil she knew over the devil she didn't know. But that expression is for choosing between what's familiar over what's unfamiliar. An old job over a new job. Maybe even between a regular man you know versus a regular man you don't. It's not for choosing between a man who has violated your friend for many years and a man who has done nothing but be foreign and not your personal cup of tea. Big should be the devil they know because they know of all the devilish shit he done did. Whereas Petrovsky only managed to rise to an equal opposite in their mind, the devil they don't know, because of how comfortable they are perceiving a foreigner as inherently suspicious or dangerous. Because Miranda never once felt so strongly about any of Carrie's other, but all of a sudden, she's sick and weeping from worry. And Miranda tried to frame it like her problem with Petrovsky was that he was like stealing Carrie's identity. But at each and every point, Petrovsky presented Carrie with exactly who he was and what his plans were and allowed Carrie to make a choice. Carrie always opted to choose him because Carrie always opts to choose men and change herself and subsume her life into theirs. Petrovsky told Carrie he wasn't having kids and he understood if that was a deal breaker for her. Carrie is the one who says she ain't want to risk losing a man she just meet for potential babies, so them kids. Petrovsky told her he was moving to Paris and he'd like her to come with him. Carrie decided she wanted to go. Carrie's job tell her she couldn't keep writing Sex in the City from Paris, and Carrie decided to quit her job to go move to Paris with Petrovsky. Which, by the way, there was nothing inherently wrong with her doing that, despite how Miranda was carrying on. At that point, Carrie had been writing that column for a million years and had been started moving on. She'd already published her own book, flew to LA because it almost got optioned for a movie. She was writing for Vogue. Absolutely nothing was wrong with her deciding that she was okay to move on from her column if it meant building a life with the man she wanted to be with and pursuing other professional endeavors. Only Miranda won't work at the same firm till she dead. But my point is this. Miranda was reframing Carrie's decisions as Petrovsky being some kind of nefarious misogynist who wanted to rob her of her autonomy as a woman. But that was not what was happening. Carrie was exercising her autonomy and making choices for herself. But Miranda didn't like it because Miranda perceived those choices as centering Petrovsky's wants over Carrie's. But that was no fault of Petrovsky's. Miranda hated Petrovsky for making the very choices that she wished Carrie made. Petrovsky chose Carrie, but he wasn't going to give up his job, his passion, his identity as an artist, or his home to be with her. The truth of the situation was that Carrie genuinely did not know if she wanted to have kids, and she didn't have plans for the future because Carrie never made plans. She operated on the whims of men and money, whereas Petrovsky knew exactly who he was and what he wanted, so he stood 10 toes down on that. Whilst Carrie knew she didn't feel strongly enough about any of the things that constituted deal breakers for Petrovsky to fight him on them or to lose the relationship for them. Neither potential kids, her column, or the life she'd built for herself were as important to her as Miranda would have liked them to be. And that damn sure wasn't Petrovsky's fault nor problem. And it wasn't even a Carrie problem. It was a Miranda problem. Ironically enough, for all the autonomy Miranda was so worried Petrovsky was robbing Carrie of, she and the girls robbed her of it when they unleashed her toxic-ass boyfriend onto the streets of Paris to find Carrie and bring her home because they wanted Carrie home, in spite of the choices that Carrie had made for herself. And even more ironically, for as male-centered as Miranda was tired of Carrie being, I cannot think of a more male-centered solution to not liking that your friend is seemingly choosing her man over herself than to get her ex-man to go get her back from that man. Especially when her ex-man has never once chosen her and has consistently been the reason she compromised herself. Also, the fact that they felt so confident that Big could get Carrie back when she was already living in Paris with the man she'd committed to confirms that the girls all knew that all the other men in Carrie's life were just placeholders for Big. In other words, they all knew that Carrie was just wasting all these time. But let's really talk about Carrie's move to Paris. Because if you let Carrie, her friends, and the fans tell it, Petrovsky was dogging her right out. Whole time, no such thing happened. Oh my God. The first thing we need to understand about Carrie moving to Paris with Petrovsky is that Petrovsky was a 50-something-year-old man and Carrie was 40-something going on 17, acting out a romantic comedy where a Manhattan girl gets swept off her feet by a rich foreign artist who whisked her away to Paris to do all the romantic things she'd previously complained to him were too much for her as an American and gave her the ick. But now that she in Paris, she expecting the whole nine. And let me make this clear. Petrovsky was planning to stay and live in Paris because it was his home, but he specifically moved to Paris for work. That was not only there to work, that in the middle of preparing his upcoming comeback exhibit and invited Carrie to move with him. But because he was too busy with work to prioritize entertaining her during her first week of her being there, when she noticed man has an exhibit in days, Carrie and her friends was carrying on like this sent her to Guantanamo Bay and went on the lam. How Carrie carried on proved to me that Big wasn't wrong for refusing to take Carrie with him when he had to move to Paris for work, no matter how hard she was trying to make it happen.
Look, I have to be in a relationship where if I have to go to Paris, I have to go to Paris.
Fine, go to Paris, and then what happens to us next year when you decide you just have to go to Brazil?
This isn't about us. This is about work.
Let's listen to the plight that Carrie suffered in her week of being there. Carrie fell down in a store, lost a necklace, felt bored one day, missed an impromptu fan meet and greet, and called her friends like she ain't never experienced this kind of mother oppression in her life.
Help me! Help me! Nigga!
As someone who moved to the United States of America alone when I was just 14 years old, I cannot begin to tell y'all the amount of grace that I do not have for this grown-ass woman carrying on like she good dead. Because Petrovsky too busy for her this week, and she bored of shopping at designer stores and living in a luxury hotel that she ain't paying for because she doesn't yet have friends to hang out with in the city that she just moved to.
Oh, boo-hoo.
Dog, y'all really don't understand how ridiculous it is that we let Carrie's dramatics have us feeling bad for this bitch. Y'all don't think Carrie could go on a tour of the city or a million other things to occupy her rich ass time in Paris? Dog, broke ass students going on trips with a backpack figure out more things to do in Europe, could fend for themselves better. More importantly, we need to understand that Carrie was not going there as a tourist. It wasn't like Petrovsky fly her there for a vacation then abandon her for work. Carrie was immigrating there. Petrovsky moved her there for them to live and do life together, which for most people includes work. Petrovsky was working. The plan was to be there for life. She ain't a dad because he couldn't drop everything he had going on just because it was her first time in Paris and she thinks she named Emily. Y'all know how insane it is for a grown-ass woman to be incapable of spending time with herself for a week?
Oh my God.
Are y'all kidding me? It was a week. Carrie spent a week in Paris. That's how long she couldn't stomach not being the main character.
Who do you bloody think you are?
Do you know how many things a healthy adult woman in her 40s with her rich man's credit card could do to entertain herself for a week in Europe?
Bitch.
The amount of weaponized helplessness is so crazy. Oh my God, guys, it's forward. Oh my God, the forward, I don't know what it's saying. The phone is cutting off. I'm gonna cry in the streets. What the f? The way Carrie convinced us she was a victim has made me want to spit. And the gag is, let Petrovsky had really been creased right up under her in Paris. She would have been looking at him with the ick face just like she looked at Aiden. And she'd have been sitting up there writing a book about how she wished Big was there. And I'm not saying that Petrovsky wasn't wrong at any point. Not at all. But he was never a villain. I'll give y'all that he was wrong to make dinner plans with her and keep her waiting up. Although it was confirmed that he had called to let her know he wasn't gonna make it. But Carrie is a gal who could barely figure out how to use her cell phone in the US, let alone France, so. But you know what he wasn't wrong for? Get ready to shoot me with y'all big guns, and y'all can shoot me. Because every time I stand up for people's right to care about their mother career and profession, there's me bitches popping up in my comment like, oh my God, what if my man couldn't do this for me? And I'd be crying, y'all stop it, none of this. Not over here. Y'all need to understand that y'all dealing with an immigrant with an immigrant's work ethic. This is one of 7 channels. I don't play this bare minimum stuff. Petrovsky was not wrong for prioritizing his exhibit and his career over showing Carrie to town.
You can't handle the truth.
Petrovsky was creased up in Carrie's face for the majority of their short-lived relationship. The entire time they were in New York City, he was whining and dining her. He had her in the crib. He gave her a key. He let her meet the assistants. He was finding any old kind of way to incorporate her into every aspect of his life. You would think that would buy him time to recommit himself to his work for a week. And another thing, y'all really gonna shoot me now. He is not the bad guy because Carrie missed that impromptu meet and greet. Yup. Let me explain something to y'all and Carrie. When your partner is having a big moment in their life, when it's their time to shine, you are supposed to comfortably take the back seat and not only let them shine, support them. Hold their purse. It was absolutely batshit that Carrie moved to Paris to be with this man who she knew was planning his upcoming comeback exhibit. That's what he moved there for. But somehow didn't think her attendance at the exhibit's opening and all the associated events was mandatory.
Oh my God, bro.
There's no reason under the sun why Carrie should have made any plans of any kind on the night of his show or not make herself available to support him during the season of his life. Just take a second to imagine Berger trying to duck Carrie book release party because he went hang out with some fans he met earlier that day. Then think about what we would have had to say about that as a fandom. If y'all don't go off, yeah? Petrovsky shouldn't even have to beg her to go with him to be his support in the first place. That should have been a given. And I do not care that supporting the man she claimed to be building a life with on one of the biggest nights of his career would mean she would have disappointed 2 fans she just met that day. Because let's make sure we be real. Carrie didn't give a about those fans. She wasn't trying to become their friend or build community with them because she's in a foreign place and she don't know nobody yet. I can assure you that had she made it to the event, she would not have befriended any of the folks in attendance. The only reason Carrie wanted to attend that impromptu meet and greet was because she missed feeling like the main character and she was eager to feel that again by being celebrated by some fans, which is fine. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But that wasn't her night to be in the spotlight and to be celebrated by fans. It was Petrovsky's. And let me just say this. I can tell you this from experience as someone who has watched and interacted with by hundreds of thousands of strangers online. People will tell you that they love you, they love you, they love you, they love you. But the second you disappoint them or fail to live up to the imagined version of you in their minds, you will get whiplash how fast they turn on you. Which is why them same fans who claim to love her so much that day, who work at a bookstore, you would think would have some value for books, were quick to use her book as a coaster when she didn't make it to that event. They didn't give a about what she may have had going on or why she didn't make it. They wasn't saying to themselves, oh, maybe she get lost, she ain't from here. They didn't give her the benefit of the doubt because they do not know her. It is a transactional relationship. Those cannot be the that you failed to play your background support role on one of your partner's biggest nights for. I'm so sorry. It just can't be. If you have to go back to the bookstore and go apologize to them and make it up to them and plan something else later, whatever have you. But it can't be the reason that you missed that. It's so wild how that shit got spun to make Petrovsky the bad guy for begging her to go to the event with him. This man been telling her how important this event is to him and how worried he is about how it'll be received. She's supposed to know that he needs her support, even if he gets his confidence back once he's at the event. As far as I'm concerned, Carrie's support was obligatory in that scenario. So unlike her and the fans of this show, I did not interpret him letting go of her hand after promising to hold it every second of the night as releasing her from her obligation to stay there and support him. I do think it justifies her addressing it later, if for no other reason than it hurt her feelings. But this whole, how dare he let go of her hand after he forced her to go with him and miss her party, is some bullshit that fails to understand why the you in Paris in the first place. Had it been a random event or something unrelated to this exhibit down the line, then that would be a different story. Had it been Carrie in the middle of her moment, her book release, or something major in her life, had the little meet and greet been in any way prearranged, then hell yeah, I'd be on her side. And I'd have kicked Petrovsky's fucking back in, just like I jumped Berger's old Hayden ass. But in this instance,
this shit right here, nigga. This shit right here, nigga. Right here, this shit, nigga.
No. And it don't matter that he let go of her hand, because holding her hand all night shouldn't have been a condition for her to have to attend. She was supposed to attend regardless. And even though Petrovsky was somewhat dismissive of her feelings in the conversation when she tried to talk to him about it later that night, just like I understood when she wasn't trying to hear him tell her that shit when Samantha was sick, I understood why he wasn't trying to entertain this gal, not only trying to kill his joy after his event, but accusing him of abandoning her because she chose to go sit down and have a silent tantrum in hopes that it would pull him away from his event so he could check on her feelings instead of being in his moment. Carrie was in this man's face, screaming at him like he'd been oppressing her because she was, quote, eating alone, waiting on her boyfriend who would rather spend time with a light installation. And that's how she said. That's what she said, how she said. Like his life's work is some stupid shit he doing just to inconvenience her. Dog. I talked about this at length in my Derwin and Melody the Game video, but I cannot stand a person who sees their partner's dreams as beneath them. And in this instance, Carrie fixing her mouth to talk about the work of a world-renowned artist like it's a bullshit hobby he wasting time on is insane. Whole time it's that man's work that financed their move to Paris. Which is why Petrovsky's response that this is my work, this is who I am, and you always knew that, was absolutely right. And it's what I'd like to hear from more people when their romantic partners expect them to choose them over their passion, purpose, or sense of self. I cannot blame Petrovsky for not wanting to hear no more from Carrie after that and trying to leave the conversation. Which brings me to my last point. Petrovsky did not intentionally slap Carrie, and we all know that. So I don't know why we insist on pretending that that's what happened just to vilify that man. That shit was an accident. We saw it, and even Carrie knew that's what it was. So what are we doing here? Like I said, I am not saying that Petrovsky was perfect, but he was worlds ahead of the man who supposedly rescued Carrie from him. Which brings us to our final section. The Big versus Petrovsky game. Earlier, I talked about how Petrovsky is othered as a foreigner in several ways. Chief among them, Carrie deeming him the Russian. I also think it's worth thinking about that moniker in relation to Carrie's other men. Unlike Flavor Flav, Carrie didn't name all her Aiden was just Aiden, Berger was just Berger. The only who got nicknames were John James Preston and Alexander Petrovsky. But while John gets lionized into Mr. Big, Petrovsky gets flattened into the Russian, which is one, illustrative of how those characters are treated by the show overall, thus why Big is not only the barometer by which every man is measured, despite Big having failed every test the other men are measured by. He's who's sent in to rescue Carrie from Petrovsky. And two, it's illustrative of how the fans receive the characters, which is why so many fans who have butterflies for Big didn't care for Petrovsky at all and shared Carrie's delusional belief that she would have had a better time in Paris with Big, a man who wouldn't even take her to Paris at all. But if we actually compare Big and Petrovsky blow for blow, y'all will be lucky if Petrovsky don't sue all y'all and the show writers for defamation. Because ending the series framing him as the villain opposite Big was character assassination of the highest order. So let's do it. Let's really compare how Big moved versus how Petrovsky moved. Because just about everything that Petrovsky is perceived as having done wrong, it only takes one glance at Big's track record to know that's a lie. So first, let's look at how they handled moving to Paris for work. Round one. moving for work. Put up a scoreboard, Aaron. When Big decided he was moving to Paris for work, he told Carrie at the last possible minute, he told her he ain't taking her, he ain't doing long distance, she ain't the one, and she need to stop making all this noise in his house about it while he's trying to watch football. He did not give two about the 2 years she'd invested in their relationship. He said he was moving to Paris and he don't owe her an explanation. Carrie offered to quit her job or transfer her job and move there herself so they could be together. And Big said, hey, don't do that shit on my account. They broke up. He went to Paris, met Natasha, proposed to Natasha, and immediately moved back to New York City so he could marry Natasha and give her the engagement and wedding of her dreams. Compare that to Petrovsky, who when he decided he was moving to Paris for work and life, he invited Carrie to move with him, flew her and all her things out. So that's 1 point for Petrovsky. Petrovsky also gets a bonus point this round because when Big decided he was moving to California for work this time, he ain't tell Carrie shit at all yet again. She only happened to hit him up right before he left, and that's the only reason she find out. Then she bent over backwards trying to make their last night together in New York City special, only for him to still dust out before she could even tell him bye. Nasty work. Round 2, meeting the family. Carrie wanted to meet Big Mummy so damn bad, she stalked him at the church to force an introduction, and Big still ain't introduced her as his woman. In the course of 6 seasons, 2 movies, and a reboot, we never once saw Carrie introduced as his woman to a soul in his family. Whereas on Carrie's very first day in Paris, the first thing Petrovsky did was introduce her to his daughter. Point for Petrovsky. Round 3, meeting the ex. Carrie was so insecure in her relationship with Big, she was desperate to meet Big ex-wife. So she stalked the woman just to try to find out more about their relationship and to learn more about Big that he wouldn't tell her. Whole time, Big was still in contact with his ex, so he knew Carrie was stalking her, but he still never made the connection or gave the okay for Carrie and her to have any kind of relationship in order to reassure Carrie or anything of the sort. Meanwhile, once Carrie was in Paris, Petrovsky immediately arranged for Carrie to meet his ex-wife and allowed them to go to lunch together on their own, where Carrie was free to get to know her and inquire about her relationship with Petrovsky. Point for Petrovsky. Round 4, the ex-wives reviews. Big ex-wife said that their very short-lived marriage ended because Big was a cheater who fucked her friend. Petrovsky's ex-wife said that she and Petrovsky had a good marriage for 5 or 7 years, but it ended because he worked too much. And guess which one of these reviews Carrie's stupid ass found more alarming? Point for Petrovsky. Round 5, having kids. Petrovsky tells Carrie up front that he has an adult daughter and he doesn't want any more children and won't have any more children, so that she can properly decide whether she wants to be with him, allowing her to decide whether she wanted kids. We have never seen Carrie and Big discuss whether they were going to have children or seen Big ask Carrie whether she wanted kids. By the Sex and the City 2 movie, we hear Carrie say that they're not having kids, but that's all we get. And knowing what we know about Big and Carrie, I feel very confident that Carrie simply didn't raise the issue because she had a hard enough time getting him to marry her, let alone have a baby. Point for Petrovsky. Round 6, in sickness and in health. We've got to twist this round. This time, it's Petrovsky versus Big versus Aiden versus Carrie too. In this round, we're evaluating how each man showed up as it pertained either to their own health, the health of a friend, or Carrie's, or some health-related event. When Petrovsky learns that Samantha has cancer, he tries to prepare and comfort Carrie in the way he thinks is best, but not in the way Carrie would have preferred. Aiden not only physically picked Miranda's naked body off the bathroom floor when she pulled her neck and Carrie sent him to help in her place, when Miranda's mom died, not even Carrie's, when Miranda's mom died, Aiden went to the funeral to support Carrie without even being asked. Meanwhile, when Big has heart surgery, when Carrie's taking care of him and Big is worried about his mortality, he offers Carrie commitment. But the moment he woke up in the morning and that fear had subsided, he immediately emotionally detached from Carrie and dust out again. But Big gets saved this round because when Big had a heart attack, Carrie just laid over his fucking body crying and let him die. So this round goes to Aiden. And last but not least, round 7, being stood up. Petrovsky ain't never even stand Carrie up for true. He tried to tell her he'd be home too late for dinner when they were in Paris, and he let go of her hand at the event after promising to hold it all night. Meanwhile, Big not only couldn't be bothered to so much as stay to hear Carrie home at a friend's wedding one time, as well as he was absent for most of Carrie's major life events all throughout the series, including her book release party he could have definitely visited New York City from California to attend if he gave a but he didn't, because he was definitely still calling her for phone sex in the same time period. Let's remember the big thing. Big stood Carrie up at their wedding. At their wedding. Big would not claim Carrie for the first 2 years of their relationship. Dump her, immediately met, proposed to, and married another woman, relegated Carrie to a side chick, lost his wife, and still ain't claimed Carrie. Ran in and out of her life for the next many years, left her at the altar after a decade of dating when he's married 2 other women without hesitation. Then he dropped down dead and leave his ex-wife he cheat on with Carrie $1 million dollars. And that is far from an exhaustive list of all the ways Big treated Carrie like a woman he need only do the bare minimum for and hide from the public. Carrie spent the vast majority of her relationship with Big complaining that she didn't get exactly what Petrovsky offered. But I am supposed to see Petrovsky as the villain because he put her on the back burner while he focused on his light installation for a week? That's who she leave Petrovsky for. That's who Sex and the City wanted me to believe was the better man who needed to rescue her? Dog, y'all can all kiss my ass, yeah? Justice for Alexander Petrovsky. Y'all, your girl is nominated for a Webby Award. I am nominated in the category for Best Narrative, Storytelling, or Writing, and I need y'all to vote for me. Let's bring your girl a Webby. You can click the link in the description below, or we have a QR code right on the screen to make life easy. Go ahead and vote for yours truly. If you enjoyed the video you just watched, it's your lucky day because you just found it on one of 7 channels inside my Olurinati-verse. Subscribe to Olurinati, my flagship channel, where you'll find my magnum opuses like If Pretty is a Privilege, Ugly is a Curse, How This Didn't Age Well, Destroyed Media Literacy, How Men Become Aziz Ansari, and more. Subscribe to Olurinati Pop for my TV and film essays on shows like How I Met Your Mother, Sex and the City, Desperate Housewives, You, Euphoria, Insecure, and so many more. You can also join Olurinati Pop on Patreon to watch all of my YouTube videos uncensored. Subscribe to Olurinati Bites for short, serious, and nuanced commentary on whatever the internet is spiraling about. Subscribe to Olay and Chill if you're trying to laugh and chill while unpacking the latest TikTok chaos. Subscribe to Olurinati Politics for sharp breakdowns of the political moments shaping our lives right now. Subscribe to Olurinati Extras for music commentary and industry deep dives. Subscribe to Olay and Friends to watch your favorite Black thinkers and creators dissect the culture. Subscribe to any or all the channels in the Olurinati-verse that speak to you, and I'll see you there. And you can also follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky at Olurinati. And you can also follow Olurinati Pop and Olay and Chill on Instagram and TikTok so you never miss a thing. If you enjoyed this Sex and the City video, it's your lucky day because I have a playlist full of Sex and the City videos. Watch the one being recommended to you on the screen right now and check out my Patreon for all the uncensored versions of these videos.